Hey guys, this is Miss Drake with the Personal Project Report screencast. This first screencast I would like to do really addresses some of the things you need to do before you actually start writing your report. Those are going to be some paperwork issues that you need to have cleared up as you are beginning to write your report, which again is due on February the 16th. So the first thing you need to make sure that you have done and are doing are your supervisor meetings and your process journal entries. So before the end of January, which is happening in about a week and a half, you should have your second meeting with your supervisor, if you haven't already. I would strongly suggest that you discuss with your supervisor how well you've done with your research, plan of action, criteria, and product, and of course effectively utilize their feedback and comments. Sit down with your supervisor, and I would recommend that both of you look at your ManageBack account so you can take your laptop or use the teacher's computer, possibly, to log into ManageBack, and both of you have a sit down and go over what's in your ManageBack account. You should have filled out that worksheet tab, and you should be, of course, having some process journal entries in your process journal tab. Get some clear and helpful feedback on what you've accomplished with your supervisor, so at this point you can move on from there. And within the first 2 weeks of February, you should have your third meeting before you submit your project report. So what would you do in that meeting? Well, I would strongly suggest that you request feedback on your report for its content. You don't have to have your entire report written. You can do an outline. You can maybe have one of the criteria addressed for your project report. You could have part of your report done, whatever you'd like to do, and ask your supervisor to sit down and either score that with a rubric or just to give you in general some feedback for its content. Now, your supervisors may or may not be able to help you with its structure. Some of the supervisors are more familiar with the IB program and the structure of the writing than others, but really your supervisor has been there for you to mostly guide you with content and rigor. They can give you specific feedback, of course, on its structure, but if you have any particular questions, you are welcome to come and see me at any time. Of course, I have a class 4th period B day during the second semester, but you could send me an email. You can come see me after school. Also, I have 3rd period planning, so you can come see me during your lunch if you need to. By the time you begin your report, all of your process journal entries should be uploaded to ManageBack. So you really shouldn't be writing any more process journal entries while you're writing your project report, because your project report should be based on all of those entries. If you've waited to upload all of those until now, you've really made the wrong decision on that. But I don't want you to ditch everything right now. You might not be able to show the progress that you wanted to show in terms of its entirety, and there may be some question about that, but it would be preferable for your information to be there in ManageBack and, of course, attached to your project report as opposed to it not being there. But keep in mind that your process journal entries are there really to structure your report and add to the appendices. And the appendices are not going to be scored directly. They are there for supplementary evidence, which is vital. But I want you to understand that you don't need to feel like you need to scramble to add a whole bunch more entries if you only have a few. Let's use what we have and possibly add to, finish uploading everything, and try to salvage that and go from there. And I've also kind of looked on ManageBack and clicked through some people's information there on ManageBack, and some of you really don't have much of anything in your process journal entries. Again, you need to fix that issue right away. A lot of students think that they could scramble at the last minute and make up some stuff that they've done in the past, but it's incredibly evident when you're reading those process journal entries as a supervisor, kind of the generalizations that are made in those, and they're not really that great. So it's preferable to have, I don't know, maybe 8 process journal entries as actual thought reflective kind of entries that is almost like journaling, as opposed to just, a whole bunch of little blurbs that you did this on this day and that day where it's only 2 or 3 sentences, because this is a reflective style of writing. So again, for the process journal entries, make sure you have somewhere around 8, possibly 10 of those really good reflective, really thick and in detail process journal entries. And if you're interested in what those should look like, then you can go back to the example paper that I've given you before. So here's the picture of the sample personal project report that I had copied and given to everyone. And so if you remember, just kind of looking at Appendix E, if you wanted to turn to that if you have a copy of the sample project report that I'd given you, this is a really good, thick, very detailed reflective piece for the process journal entry. So you could see those there. There's some pictures in there as well. And it's very descriptive. So again, the student doesn't have like 2 or 3 sentence blurbs, which are really not going to be very helpful at all. They also have at the end like an evaluation, and a lot of you have been doing that, going back to those ATL skills and reflecting on how those ATL skills apply to your process journal entries. That's exactly what you should have. So here's another section of a process journal entry, Appendix F, for this particular student. So again, it's pretty detailed in terms of the descriptions of what was going on. But the student only used several or a few of these, and I think only had a total of like 6 or 7 appendices and not all 10. But really, if you have all 10, I would definitely utilize the space that you have to provide any evidence so that your assessor has no wiggle room in terms of scoring your project and have questions about what you've done. So again, if you've had problems getting those process journal entries in, let's get that fixed today. 2 pieces of paperwork that you'll need to have with your project report are the academic honesty form and the project report cover sheet. These should really take you no more than, 15 minutes of time to generate and put together. Once you've had your 3rd meeting with the supervisor, make sure you completely fill out the academic honesty form. There's a printable copy of that on my website, and I'll show you what it looks like. So when you go to my web page, you'll notice there's a personal project link over to the left, and that will take you to this page where there are personal project files. There's the project cover sheet document and the academic honesty form document. When you download the academic honesty form, it looks like this. There's also a paper copy in your handbook, and some of you might have already filled this out, and I've also brought some of those to Miss Tinsley's class, so you may have already done this or some of this. So you are too, you can type it or you can handwrite it. Your student name and your student number and the school name, Concord High School. I've already input the school number for you and the supervisor name. Then what you do here for the 3 meetings is that you put the date, you put the main points discussed, and of course you are going to sign that. And you're going to take it to your supervisor, and you're going to ask your supervisor, if you haven't already, to sign for those 3 meetings. And I'll be honest, if you haven't done the meetings correctly, like if it's just been a fly-by-night kind of thing, and you really haven't had those meetings, or you intend to but you just haven't yet, your supervisor may not sign that, because of course that's academic integrity in terms of you, and of course integrity in terms of your supervisor. But on February the 16th, when your project report is due, you have to turn this in along with your project report. The supervisor can comment here in this box, and then you and the supervisor, please make sure that you sign all of the necessary areas. So even if your supervisor refuses to sign the 3 meetings, your supervisor should sign here at the bottom, and of course they'll be able to comment at the top and put a date on that. And again, you're going to upload this to ManageBac. We're going to submit everything electronically and in hard copy, but we'll talk about that later. But this goes along with your project report, which is due on February the 16th. So again, on my website, you can also find the personal project cover sheet. This should take literally minutes of your time to put the student name, student number, school name. I put the school number for you, supervisor name, title of your project, your goal, your word count. Make sure that you do that. And then, of course, you check all of the lists there. Hopefully you have all of those. And you're going to include that. Of course, that's going to be the top page of your project report. Pretty simple. That's on my webpage as well. Also, I brought hard copies to Miss Tinsley's class for you. If you have any questions about those 2 documents, you can come see me. Again, you can come see me to get a copy, or you can send me an email. But there's the information there for the academic honesty form and the project report cover sheet. Those are necessary items that the IB requires. The latest that I've read is that they might not even accept your project or project report if you don't especially have the academic honesty form. So let's make sure we have both of those pieces of paperwork on February the 16th. Okay, so let's talk about this phase 3 where you were doing your product. You were actually doing your thing, your outcome, whatever it might be. And you're going to then assess your own product or outcome with your own criteria before you write your project report. So if you'll take a look on page 38 of the handbook, you'll notice that you have to score your own product or your outcome based on the criteria that you have created. So earlier when you created that criteria, now's the time you're going to deploy that. So make sure that you have determined how you're going to address and assess each part of your own criteria. Make sure that it was measurable. You need to make sure that you have measured this in some way, that you can prove that you've done the best job that you possibly can, for example. And also make sure that you don't have any parts of your criteria that you can't address. For example, if you made a pamphlet that's supposed to be usable by 16-year-old girls, but yet you've gotten no feedback in order to make sure that happens, you may want to consider that you need to leave that out of your criteria at this point because you can't measure that. This is one of the things that I would sit down and talk with my supervisor about, either in meeting number 2 if you're ready, or by definitely meeting number 3. So what should your own assessment look like? Well, again, I know this is always very vague. It depends on your own product. But here's some ideas. For example, you could take your actual criteria or your rubric or whatever and actually score it directly on that paper. But you could also write up your own assessment and actually put this in as a process journal entry. However you want to do that is up to you. Just make sure that you assess your product with your own criteria. Either way, I would definitely include some sort of process journal entry about it. I think that would be very helpful and help you to stay reflective on what you've done for your project. Keep in mind that at this point you should have been able to meet most of the criteria rubric that you've created, whatever it is that you wanted to assess. I want you to also understand that running out of time and not managing your time well is not really something good to include. If you've had struggles and setbacks for extraneous reasons, maybe things beyond your control, that's a great thing to put in there to reflect upon. But if it's your own lack of time management, well, that's going to be reflected in the scoring by your supervisor. So just be aware of that. And of course, if you have any questions about assessing your own product or outcome with your own criteria, you're welcome to come and see me or send me an email. So because I can only record 15-minute long screencasts at a time, this is going to be the end of screencast number 1 in preparation before the report. Just some stuff to kind of get in order before you really jump into the report writing. And the next screencast will actually cover how the report is organized and what you need to do in terms of writing that actual report. But keep in mind that you need to be able to have access to that personal project handbook that's on my website. It's very helpful. Be sure that you're familiar with the rubric, the IB rubric, by which your assessor or your supervisor is going to score your project report with.